At my sister's wedding, I was supposed to sit with my family. At least, that was what my mother told me before I arrived. She called me that morning with the same careful voice she used whenever she wanted control to sound like kindness. Wear something simple, Claire. Do not draw attention. Smile for the pictures. And please let Madison have her day. So I did what she asked. I wore a plain navy dress, pinned my hair back, chose small earrings, and arrived early with a wooden box wrapped in cream ribbon. The box had belonged to my grandmother Margaret, the only person in my family who had ever made me feel wanted. For 8 years, it had stayed locked in my apartment. For 8 years, my family had acted as if they were not afraid of what was inside it. The wedding was held at the Briarwood Hotel, in the largest ballroom they had. White roses covered the archways. Crystal lights hung over the tables, and champagne glasses caught the light like little pieces of ice. Near the entrance, a gold sign read Bennett and Whitmore. My last name looked beautiful there, polished and respectable, as if the people wearing it had never lied, stolen, or thrown one daughter away to protect the other. At the front of the room, my mother stood beside Madison, touching her veil, even though nothing was out of place. My father laughed beside Charles Whitmore, the groom's father, too loudly and too often. Madison looked perfect in white, glowing in the center of everything, exactly where she had always believed she belonged. A wedding coordinator checked the seating chart when I gave my name. Her smile faded before she could hide it. She checked another page, then another, and when she looked back at me, I already knew something was wrong. "I am sorry," she said quietly. There was a small adjustment. I looked past her into the ballroom, toward the tables filled with family, flowers, and soft gold light. "Adjustment?" Her fingers tightened around the clipboard. "Your seat is just outside the main room." She said it gently, but there was no gentle way to say that the bride's sister had been pushed out of the room. I followed her through a side door, and the wedding changed in one step. The music softened behind us. The smell of roses and perfume disappeared, replaced by floor cleaner, warm food trays, and garbage bags. A service cart stood near the kitchen entrance. 2 trash cans sat against the wall. Beside them was one chair, and on that chair was one folded place card with my name written in silver ink. Claire Bennett. For a moment, I could not move. The coordinator whispered another apology, but I barely heard her. I looked through the open door and saw my mother watching me from inside the ballroom. She saw the chair. Then she looked away, and that hurt more than the chair itself. Madison appeared a moment later, her white dress sweeping behind her. She looked at the chair first, then at the box in my hands, and her smile turned small and sharp. "Well," she said softly, "guess you don't count." She did not need to shout. She only needed to say out loud what my family had been telling me in quieter ways my entire life. My mother stepped into the hallway behind her, calm on the outside, hard in the eyes. "Claire," she whispered, "do not make a scene. This is your sister's wedding." There it was again. Madison could humiliate me. My mother could watch, my father could pretend not to notice, but if I reacted, I would be the one ruining the day. I looked at the chair again and understood the cruelty of its placement. It was close enough for them to say I had been invited, but far enough to keep me out of the photographs. Close enough to summon if they needed me, but hidden enough that I would not speak to anyone important. They had not forgotten me. They had placed me exactly where they wanted me. Madison tilted her head, still smiling, as if she had won something. "You should be grateful, Mom. Let you come at all." I did not answer her. I looked past her into the ballroom, toward the front table where Charles Whitmore had just opened a leather folder. Charles was silver-haired, still, and watchful, the kind of man who looked at papers before he looked at smiles. My father leaned toward him, speaking quickly, smiling too much. A server moved aside, and for one clear second I saw the top page inside the folder: trust release and collateral consent. My fingers tightened around the wooden box. I knew those words. I knew what they meant. And I knew there was only one reason my family would be discussing Margaret's trust at Madison's wedding. They needed my signature. Or worse, they already had one. My mother followed my eyes, and for the first time that evening, fear crossed her face. "Claire," she said softer now, "sit down. Not sorry. Not please. Just sit down." Madison's smile weakened as she looked at the box again. "What is that?" I held it a little closer to my chest. "A wedding gift." Madison's voice sharpened. "Then leave it on the gift table." I looked at the glittering table inside the ballroom, covered with silver envelopes and wrapped packages. Then I looked back at the chair beside the trash cans. "No," I said, keeping my voice calm. My mother's jaw tightened. "Claire, do not start." I looked at her and said, "I am not starting anything." For once, it was true. I picked up the place card with my name on it and slipped it into my purse. Then I held my grandmother's box against my chest and turned toward the exit. Behind me, Madison hissed my name, but I kept walking. My mother followed me a few steps, her voice low and furious. "If you leave now, do not expect this family to forgive you." That almost made me laugh. Forgive me for refusing to sit beside the trash. Forgive me for not handing over the one thing they feared. Forgive me for walking away from a lie I had carried for 8 years. I stopped, but I did not turn around. "For 8 years," I said quietly. "I waited for this family to tell the truth." No one answered, so I left. I walked through the hallway without shouting, without crying, and without begging for a better seat. I passed the hotel staff, the flower arrangements, and the guests still arriving with bright smiles and expensive gifts. Outside, the evening air hit my face, cold enough to steady me. I reached my car and finally let my hands shake. Not because I regretted leaving. I shook because I understood why they had kept me close but hidden. I was not unwanted because I was worthless. I was unwanted because I was dangerous to the story they were selling. The box felt heavy in my arms when my phone buzzed. The message was from Maya Lawson, my lawyer and the only person who had a copy of what was inside that box. "Charles has the file." I stared at the screen, and before I could answer, a second message appeared. "He is asking why your signature is on the trust release." My breath caught as a third message came in. "He is looking for you." I turned back toward the hotel and looked through the glass doors. People were shifting near the ballroom entrance. My father stood too fast. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Madison turned sharply, her veil pulling at her hair. Then the music stopped, and for one breath, the whole building went still. From inside the ballroom, my sister screamed. The first time I understood that Madison and I did not live in the same family. I was 9 years old. It was not during a huge fight, or a dramatic confession, or one of those moments people remember because someone slammed a door. It happened in the kitchen, on a rainy afternoon, when Madison dropped my science project into the sink and turned on the water. I had spent 3 nights building that little model of the solar system with foam balls, wire, and paint that stained my fingernails blue. Madison said she only wanted to see if Saturn could float. When I shouted, she cried. When she cried, my mother ran in and saw only one thing. Madison was wet, frightened, and small. I was angry, loud, and old enough to know better. My mother did not ask what happened. She pulled Madison into her arms, looked at me with disappointment, and said, "Claire, she is little. You scared her." I tried to explain that my project was ruined, that it was due the next morning, that I had worked so hard. My mother dried Madison's face with a dish towel and told me to stop being selfish. My father came home later, heard my mother's version, and gave me the look he always used when he wanted peace more than truth. He said I could make another project if I really cared. Madison got hot chocolate, I got paper towels, and a wet pile of planets. That was how it worked in our house. Madison made mistakes, and everyone gathered around to soften the landing. I made one sound of pain, and suddenly, I was the problem. If Madison broke something, she was curious. If I complained, I was bitter. If Madison lied, she was overwhelmed. If I told the truth, I was jealous. My mother called it keeping harmony. My grandmother Margaret called it what it was, training one child to take and the other to disappear. Margaret lived 20 minutes away, in a brick house, with green shutters and books stacked on every table. She was my mother's mother, but they had never been close. My mother liked things polished, controlled, and impressive. Margaret liked honest people, even when honesty made the room uncomfortable. When I was small, I did not understand why my mother stiffened whenever Margaret came over. Later, I realized Margaret had the dangerous habit of seeing exactly what everyone wanted hidden. Every Sunday, Margaret invited me for tea after church. At first, Madison came too, but she got bored there. Margaret did not flatter her, did not clap when she performed, and did not reward tears with cookies. Madison stopped coming by the time she was 11. I kept going. In Margaret's kitchen, I learned how quiet could feel safe instead of lonely. She taught me how to make lemon tea, how to balance a checkbook, how to read the fine print before signing anything, and how to sit with my back straight even when someone was trying to make me feel small. My mother hated those visits. She said Margaret was filling my head with pride. She said I came home difficult. What she meant was that I came home less willing to apologize for things Madison had done. Still, she let me go, because Margaret had money, and my mother believed love and inheritance could be managed the same way. Smile at the right time. Say the right words. Keep the difficult truths outside the family photographs. By high school, the difference between Madison and me had become impossible to miss. Madison got dance lessons, private tutoring, a new car for her 16th birthday, and my mother's full attention whenever she entered a room. I got reminders to be grateful. When I won a regional writing award, my father said it was nice. When Madison was chosen as junior prom princess, my parents took her to dinner and posted 12 photos online. When I got into college with a partial scholarship, my mother asked whether I had chosen a school far away to punish her. When Madison failed 2 classes, my mother blamed the teachers for not understanding her sensitive nature. The worst part was not the unfairness itself. It was how normal they made it sound. My mother never said she loved Madison more. She said Madison needed more support. My father never said he did not care about my achievements. He said I was independent, which became his excuse for never showing up. Madison never said she enjoyed taking what was mine. She said I should not be so dramatic about things that did not matter. Piece by piece, they built a family language where my pain became attitude. Madison's cruelty became innocence, and silence became my assigned role. Margaret was the only one who refused to speak that language. On my 18th birthday, when my parents gave me a card with $50 inside and told me they were saving for Madison's senior trip, Margaret gave me a fountain pen in a blue velvet case. It had belonged to her late husband. She placed it in my hand and said, "A woman should have something that writes her own name clearly." I did not understand all of what she meant then, but I knew enough to cry in her kitchen after everyone else had gone home. Years later, when I was 24, Margaret began getting weaker. She still dressed neatly, still kept her bills in labeled folders, still corrected my grammar when I wrote too fast, but her hands trembled when she poured tea. During one visit, she asked me to bring down a wooden box from the top shelf of her study. It was small, dark, and plain, with a brass latch that stuck slightly when she opened it. Inside were envelopes, old account statements, copies of legal forms, and a photograph of my mother as a young woman standing beside a man I did not recognize. I asked what it was. Margaret closed the lid before I could see more. Her face had gone serious in a way that made me sit straighter. She told me that families with secrets often call honest people ungrateful. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers felt thin, but her grip was firm. If the Bennetts ever ask you to sign something quickly, you do not sign it. If they say it is for Madison, you read it twice. If they say it is for the family, you call a lawyer. I laughed because I thought she was being dramatic. Margaret did not laugh with me. She said my mother loved appearances more than safety, and Madison had learned to treat other people's lives like rooms she could redecorate. Then she made me promise that, if anything ever felt wrong, I would not let guilt make the decision for me. At the time, I thought she was warning me about inheritance drama. Maybe a house. Maybe old money my mother expected to control. I did not know she was trying to prepare me for the day my own name would be used against me. I did not know that a family trust could become a weapon in the hands of people who believed rules were for outsiders. I did not know that Madison had already begun asking questions about Margaret's accounts, or that my mother had started visiting Margaret alone, smiling too sweetly, and leaving with folders she claimed were only medical paperwork. The year Margaret died, everything changed quickly. Grief did not bring my family closer. It made them sharper, quieter, more careful. My mother stopped mentioning Margaret unless she needed to remind us how difficult she had been. My father spent more time in his office. Madison acted wounded that the funeral was not more beautiful, as if even death should have been styled for her benefit. I stood beside Margaret's grave with cold hands and an empty feeling in my chest, knowing I had lost the only person who had ever told me I was allowed to take up space. A week after the funeral, my mother called and asked me to come home for a family meeting. Her voice was soft in a way that made my stomach tighten. She said there were papers to review. Nothing serious, just a few loose ends from Margaret's estate. Madison would be there. My father would explain everything. I remember standing in my apartment, with the phone pressed to my ear, looking at the blue fountain pen on my desk, hearing Margaret's voice in my memory. If they say it is for the family, you call a lawyer. I should have listened faster. I should have understood that warnings from the dead do not arrive without reason. But back then, I still believed that if I came calmly, spoke carefully, and showed them I was not the enemy, they might finally treat me like a daughter instead of an obstacle. That was the last innocent mistake I made about my family. The family meeting happened 8 days after my grandmother Margaret's funeral. I drove to my parents' house with the blue fountain pen she had given me in my purse, and her warning still fresh in my mind. If they ask you to sign something quickly, do not sign it. If they say it is for Madison, read it twice. If they say it is for the family, call a lawyer. My mother, Evelyn Bennett, opened the door before I knocked. She wore pearls, a soft sweater, and the calm expression she used whenever she had already decided what everyone else should do. "Thank you for coming, Claire," she said. "Please try to be easy tonight." I had not stepped inside yet, and I was already being told not to become a problem. My father, Richard, sat in the dining room with a stack of folders in front of him. Madison was beside him, scrolling on her phone, dressed in black and looking more annoyed than heartbroken. When she saw me, she sighed and said, "Can we not make this take all night?" My mother looked at me, not her, as if my silence was still the only behavior she expected to control. Richard said there were a few estate papers to review. Nothing dramatic, just loose ends from Margaret's trust. He slid a folder toward me and tapped the top page. "It is standard language," he said. "Your mother has reviewed it." That was meant to reassure me, but it only made me open the folder more slowly. The document named the Margaret Ellis Family Trust. I had seen that name on envelopes in Margaret's study, but she had never trusted my mother enough to explain everything in front of her. The trust held savings, part of the proceeds from Margaret's house, and a small investment account. It was not a massive fortune, but it had rules, and one of those rules was clear. Any major release of funds needed beneficiary consent. The paper in front of me was not a simple acknowledgement. It allowed a portion of the trust to be moved into a private family company called Bennett Legacy Group. My father was listed as managing officer. My mother was listed as temporary administrator. My name appeared near the bottom beside a blank signature line. I looked up. "Why does this need to be done tonight?" Evelyn smiled too quickly. "Because delays create complications." "What kind of complications?" Madison dropped her phone on the table. "Oh my God, Claire. Dad is trying to manage family money. Why do you always act like everyone is trying to steal from you?" Until that moment, I had not used the word steal. Madison had brought it into the room herself. I turned back to the document. There was no emergency clause, no clear explanation for why the money had to move, and no reason I could not have a lawyer review it. Margaret's warning pressed against my thoughts until my decision became simple. "I am not signing this today," I said. My mother's face tightened, but her voice stayed soft. Your grandmother wanted this family to stay united. No, I said. Grandma wanted things done properly. For a second, nobody spoke. Richard looked down at the table. Madison rolled her eyes. Evelyn leaned back as if I had hurt her. I should have known you would turn grief into suspicion, she said. Margaret filled your head with pride until you cannot even trust your own family. I closed the folder and stood. Richard said my name once, quietly, and for a moment I thought he might tell me the truth. But Evelyn placed her hand over his, and he went silent. That was my father's talent. He knew when something was wrong, and he still chose the easiest chair in the room. Madison smiled at me. This is why Mom says you are impossible. Nobody wants your life, Claire. I left without signing. For 2 weeks, no one called. The silence almost convinced me that walking away had worked. Then a plain white envelope arrived from a small financial administration firm. I opened it at my kitchen counter and saw the trust name printed in the first paragraph. The letter thanked me for my signed consent to release funds into Bennett Legacy Group. I read the sentence 3 times before my mind accepted it. My signed consent. I had not signed anything. A copy of the form was attached. At the bottom was a signature that looked almost like mine. The curve of the C was close. The sharp drop in the B was close. But the pressure was wrong, and the ending was too careful. Someone had studied my name and copied it. I drove to my parents' house that night, with the letter on the passenger seat. Evelyn opened the door and did not look surprised. That told me enough. I held up the paper. Who signed this? Her eyes moved to the street behind me. Lower your voice. Who signed my name? Richard appeared in the hallway, pale and silent. Madison came down the stairs in a satin robe, irritated until she saw the letter. Her face changed for half a second, and in that half second I knew. Evelyn stepped outside and pulled the door partly closed. She said the transfer had been necessary. She said the trust rules were too rigid. She said I had left them no choice. Every excuse carried the same message. If I had been a better daughter, they would not have needed to forge me. Then Madison laughed under her breath. It is just a signature. Just a signature. That was when the truth settled into place. Madison had copied my name. Evelyn had helped push it through as temporary administrator. Richard had known enough to be ashamed, and not enough to stop it. The financial administrator had accepted the scanned consent because Evelyn confirmed it as part of a family trust release, and because the amount stayed just low enough to avoid deeper review. I could have reported them that night. I could have called the firm, hired a lawyer, and dragged the whole lie into daylight. But Evelyn started crying before I could speak. She said Madison was young. Richard's business was under pressure, and the family would be ruined. She said Margaret would never want me to destroy my own blood. I looked at my father, waiting for him to protect me for once. He stared at the floor. That night, I learned exactly what I was to them. Not a daughter, a useful sacrifice. I did not forgive them. But I did not expose them either. The next morning, I took the forged form to Maya Lawson, an estate attorney recommended by one of Margaret's old friends. Maya listened carefully, made copies of everything, and told me that silence was not the same as safety. I was not ready to fight, so she sealed the documents, stored backups, and warned me that if my family ever used my name again, we would not give them a second chance. For 8 years, that evidence stayed locked away with Margaret's wooden box. And on Madison's wedding day, when I saw trust release and collateral consent inside Charles Whitmore's folder, I knew the past had not stayed buried. It had simply waited for Madison to dress it in white and call it a wedding. By the time Madison screamed, I was already halfway back to the hotel doors. My phone was still in my hand, Maya's messages glowing on the screen. Charles has the file. He is asking why your signature is on the trust release. He is looking for you. The cold air outside had steadied me for a moment, but now my chest felt tight again, not with fear, but with the sick recognition of a pattern I had been foolish enough to hope would never repeat. 8 years ago, they had used my name to move money out of Margaret's trust. Tonight, they were using it again, Only this time, the room was full of witnesses, rich guests, lawyers, investors, and one groom's family, who had no idea they were standing inside a carefully dressed lie. The front doors opened before I reached them. A hotel manager stepped out, speaking quickly into a headset, followed by two servers carrying trays they no longer seemed sure where to take. Through the glass, I saw people standing near the ballroom entrance. The music had stopped completely. Guests who had been laughing minutes earlier now leaned toward each other, with stiff smiles and confused eyes. That was the sound of a perfect wedding beginning to crack. It did not explode all at once. It shifted. A whisper here, a chair scraping there, a father standing too quickly, a bride turning pale beneath makeup that suddenly looked too heavy. Maya called before I touched the door handle. I answered without greeting her. "What did you send him?" My voice sounded calmer than I felt. Maya's reply was steady, which was one of the reasons I trusted her. The sealed packet, the old forged consent, the letter from Margaret's administrator, the comparison notes, and the notice about Bennett Legacy Group. I also sent the memo showing your consent is required for any new collateral release tied to Margaret's trust. I closed my eyes for half a second. Why now? Maya paused, then said, "Because Whitmore's legal office sent a verification request this afternoon. They asked whether you had authorized a trust release connected to Bennett Legacy Group. You told me years ago that if your family used your name again, I was not supposed to wait for permission." I remembered saying that. I had said it in Maya's office with shaking hands, after she sealed the first copies and told me that people who got away with forgery rarely stopped because they felt guilty. They stopped when the cost became higher than the reward. At the time, I thought I was setting a boundary for some distant future. I did not imagine that future would arrive wearing a bridesmaid's perfume and standing beside a trash can. "What does Charles know?" I asked. "Enough to stop signing anything," Maya said. "Not enough to know who is lying. He does not have your number. He is asking Evelyn to bring you in so he can confirm whether the signature is real." Through the glass doors, I saw my mother near the ballroom entrance, one hand clamped around Madison's wrist. Madison was saying something fast, her mouth tight and furious. My father stood beside Charles Whitmore, but he no longer looked like a host. He looked like a man watching a bridge collapse while still standing on it. "Claire," Maya said, "do not let them isolate you. Do not hand them the box. Do not argue in a hallway. If you go back in, stay where people can see you." I stepped inside the hotel. The warmth hit me first, then the smell of roses, champagne, and panic. A few guests turned when they saw me. I still had my grandmother's box in my arms, and my place card in my purse. The same coordinator who had led me to the hallway stood near the service door, pale with guilt. When our eyes met, she looked away, then looked back as if she wanted to say something but did not dare. Before I could reach the ballroom, my mother moved toward me. Her expression changed with each step. Fear first, then anger, then the soft, wounded look she used when she wanted witnesses. To see her as the injured one. "Claire," she said, keeping her voice low, "you need to come with me right now." I did not move toward her. "Where is Charles?" Her eyes flicked to the box. "This is not the time for your attitude." I almost smiled at that. Even now, with forged papers on a table and a room full of people watching her carefully built story tremble, she still thought the problem was my tone. Madison pushed past our mother, her veil uneven now, one pin hanging loose near her ear. Her face was pale under her makeup, but her eyes were sharp with panic. "What did you do?" she hissed. "I left," I said. "You were the one who told me I did not count." Her lips parted, then closed again. She looked toward the ballroom, where Charles Whitmore stood at the front table with a leather folder open before him. Ethan, Madison's groom, stood beside him, confused and tense. He had the stunned look of a man realizing the story he had been told all year might have been rehearsed by the wrong people. My father came next. He did not touch me, but he lowered his voice, as if we were still in the family dining room, and he could shrink the truth by speaking softly. "Claire, this has gotten out of hand. We can fix it privately." I looked at him and saw the same man from 8 years ago, pale, ashamed, and still choosing convenience over courage. "That is what you said last time," I replied. "Last time you fixed it by letting them use my name." His face tightened, but he said nothing. Charles Whitmore noticed me then. He was not loud. He did not storm across the room. He simply closed the folder halfway, looked at my mother, and said with terrifying calm, "Is this Claire Bennett?" The room shifted again. Guests turned. Madison's friends stopped whispering. My mother lifted her chin as if posture could save her. "This is a family matter, Charles. Claire has had a difficult history with us." He did not look away from me. "Did you sign a collateral consent tied to the Margaret Ellis Family Trust and Bennett Legacy Group?" My mother stepped in front of me before I could answer. "She is emotional. She left the reception because she wanted attention." The coordinator made a small sound near the service door. It was not much, but Charles heard it. He turned his head slightly. "Is there something you need to say?" The young woman froze. My mother's face sharpened. "No," Evelyn said quickly. "She does not." But the coordinator looked at me, then at the ballroom, then at the chair still visible in the side hallway beside the trash cans. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "Mrs. Bennett instructed us to place Miss Bennett outside the main room." Silence moved through the guests, like a spill spreading across white linen. Ethan looked at Madison. "Outside?" Madison's eyes filled instantly, but this time her tears came too late. "It was a seating issue," she said. "Claire always makes things dramatic." Charles looked past her into the hallway. He saw the chair. He saw the place where my name had been displayed away from the family tables. Then his eyes returned to me, and something in his expression changed. Not sympathy exactly. Recognition. A man who understood that a person being hidden was sometimes the most important person in the deal. He opened the folder again. "Then let us keep this simple. Miss Bennett, did you sign this document?" My mother reached for my arm, but I stepped back before she could touch me. I looked at the top page inside Charles's folder. The signature at the bottom was cleaner than the one from 8 years ago. More confident, better practiced. That made my stomach turn. Someone had not copied me once in a moment of panic. Someone had improved over time. "No," I said. My voice carried farther than I expected. "I did not sign it." Madison made a sound, half gasp, half protest. My mother went still. My father closed his eyes. Charles did not react dramatically. He only removed the page from the folder and placed it flat on the table. Then all discussions involving Bennett Legacy Group, the trust release, and any collateral backed by that trust, stop now. Ethan turned toward his bride. "Madison, what is this?" She shook her head too fast. "I do not know. Dad handles business things. Mom told me it was fine." That was almost funny. Because Madison had always known exactly which things to know and which things to forget when consequences entered the room. My mother tried one more time. "Charles, please. This is a misunderstanding, and Claire has always had resentment toward Madison." Charles looked at her then, and his voice became colder. "A forged signature is not a misunderstanding." The word forged hit the room harder than any scream could have. That was when Madison lost control. "No," she said, pointing at me. "No, she cannot do this. She always does this. She ruins everything because Grandma liked her better." Her voice rose, thin and frantic. "It was not even real money back then. Mom said it would come back before anyone noticed." The room went completely silent. Madison stopped as soon as she heard herself, but the sentence was already out. 8 years of silence broke open. In one careless breath, I looked at my mother. Her face had gone gray. Charles slowly turned to Madison. Ethan stepped back from her, as if the space between them had suddenly become necessary. My father lowered himself into a chair, and I stood there with Margaret's box in my arms, finally understanding the cruel gift of Madison's panic. She had not only confirmed tonight's lie, she had dragged the old one into the light herself. Madison's words stayed in the air longer than the music had. It was not even real money back then. Mom said it would come back before anyone noticed. No one moved for several seconds. The guests near the front table stared at her as if she had suddenly spoken in another language. Ethan's face changed first, confusion giving way to something colder. Charles Whitmore looked at Madison with the stillness of a man who had just heard enough to stop wondering whether this was a misunderstanding. My mother recovered before anyone else. She turned toward the guests with a strained smile, the kind she had used at school events, holiday dinners, and every family gathering where truth had threatened to appear. "Madison is upset," she said. "She does not know what she is saying." Then she looked at me, and her voice sharpened beneath the sweetness. "Claire has brought old resentment into a joyful day." I looked at Madison. Her lips were trembling, but not from guilt. She was terrified because she had said too much, not because she had hurt me. That difference mattered. It had always mattered. For years, my family had treated consequences as cruelty and truth as betrayal. Now the room had heard her say enough to understand that whatever this was, it had not started tonight. Charles placed one hand on the leather folder. "Mrs. Bennet, no one signs anything further. No money moves. No collateral is accepted. No agreement tied to Bennett Legacy Group continues until this is reviewed by counsel." My mother took one step toward him, but he lifted a hand, not rudely, just firmly enough to stop her. "And if any related records, emails, messages, financial documents, or venue camera footage disappear after tonight, my legal team will treat that as deliberate destruction of evidence." My father closed his eyes again. That was when I knew Charles had said the one thing Richard understood. Not family, not fairness, evidence. Ethan turned to Madison. "What did you mean by back then?" Madison shook her head quickly. "Nothing. I was confused." Her voice broke in exactly the place it needed to sound wounded. For most of her life, that would have worked. My mother would have pulled her close. My father would have told everyone she was under stress. I would have been told to apologize for pushing her too far. But Ethan did not move toward her. He only looked at her as if he were trying to find the woman he had planned to marry, and discovering a stranger in her place. My mother reached for Madison's hand. "This is not the place," she said. "We can discuss private family pain after the ceremony." Charles looked at the open folder, then at me. "Miss Bennet, do you have anything that can clarify what happened 8 years ago?" Everyone looked at the wooden box in my arms. For a moment, I almost said no. Not because I wanted to protect them, but because opening that box in front of strangers felt like letting people walk into Margaret's kitchen without permission. The box was not just evidence. It was the last private place where I still felt close to her. Inside were her notes, her warnings, copies Maya had helped me preserve, and a letter Margaret had written before she died, a letter I had read only twice, because both times it made me feel seen in a way that hurt. But then I looked at the hallway behind me. The service cart was still there. The trash cans were still there. The chair was still there, empty now, beside the place where my family had decided I belonged. They had used Margaret's trust, my name, and my silence. They had brought all of this into the wedding long before I walked back through those doors. I carried the box to the nearest table and set it down. My hands were steady when I untied the cream ribbon. The brass latch stuck the way it always did, and for one strange second, I remembered Margaret laughing at it, saying stubborn things often guarded important ones. The lid opened with a soft click. My mother whispered, "Claire, do not." It was the wrong thing to say. I removed the first envelope and handed it to Charles. "This is the copy of the consent form from 8 years ago, the one I never signed. I removed the second. This is the confirmation letter, showing the transfer into Bennett Legacy Group. Then the third. These are comparison notes from my attorney, showing the signature was copied from an old scholarship document I had signed for Margaret years before." Madison's face drained of color. My mother went very still. Ethan looked at Madison. "You knew about this?" She swallowed. "I was a teenager." I turned to her. "You were 20. Her eyes flashed. "That is not the point." For the first time that night, A low murmur moved through the guests that did not sound confused anymore. It sounded judging. Charles opened the first envelope and read silently. He did not need long. Men like him were trained to notice structure before emotion. The trust name, the receiving company, the beneficiary consent, the copied signature, the repeated pattern. When he looked up, his expression had hardened. My father finally spoke. It was a mistake. His voice was rough. The company was under pressure. We believed the funds would be restored before anything became permanent. I stared at him. 8 years of silence, and that was the best he had. A mistake. Not a crime. Not a betrayal. Not the theft of my name from my own hand. Just a mistake that happened to benefit them. And bury me. My mother turned on him. Richard. It was a warning, sharp and familiar. He lowered his eyes, but the damage had been done. Ethan heard it. Charles heard it. So did every guest close enough to pretend they were not listening. I took one more envelope from the box. This one was different. The paper had yellowed at the edges, and Margaret's handwriting was on the front. For Claire, when they ask you to doubt yourself, I held it for a moment before opening it. My voice did not shake when I read the first lines aloud. If you are reading this, my dear girl, then someone has tried to convince you that your memory is cruelty, your caution is selfishness, and your refusal is betrayal. Do not believe them. Your name is yours. No one who loves you will ask to borrow it in secret. The room became quiet in a different way. Not shocked. Heavy. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but this time I did not look away. She knew, I said. Grandma knew someone was pushing around her accounts before she died. She suspected you. She warned me not to sign anything quickly. She warned me especially if it involved Madison. Madison snapped. She hated me. Her voice cracked across the room. She always hated me because Claire was her favorite. I closed the letter and looked at her. No, Madison. She saw you clearly. That is not the same thing. Ethan stepped back from Madison, as if that sentence had confirmed something he had been afraid to think. My mother noticed and panicked. Ethan, please. You know Madison. She has a good heart. Claire has always twisted things. But Ethan was not looking at me. He was looking at the documents on the table, then at the chair in the hallway, then at the woman in the wedding dress, who had just admitted more with anger than she ever would have with honesty. Charles asked me one more question. Did you authorize the new trust release connected to tonight's agreement? I looked straight at him. No, I did not. I did not know it existed until I saw it in your folder. He nodded once, then turned to his son. Ethan, the ceremony pauses now. Madison made a small sound, like the beginning of a scream she was trying to swallow. My mother stepped forward, all softness gone. You cannot do this to your sister. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel like a child under her roof. I felt like a woman standing beside the truth with witnesses around me. I am not doing this to Madison, I said. I am done helping you hide what Madison did. Before my mother could answer, the ballroom doors opened again. Maya Lawson walked in, wearing a dark suit and carrying a slim black briefcase. She did not rush. She did not look surprised by the faces turned toward her. She came straight to my side and placed one hand lightly on the table beside Margaret's box. Then she looked at Charles Whitmore and said, Mr. Whitmore, I represent Claire Bennett. I also have the original backup file. Maya Lawson's arrival changed the room more than Madison's scream had. My mother understood that immediately. I watched her eyes move from Maya's face to the briefcase, then to the wooden box on the table, and in that moment she looked less like the mother of the bride and more like a woman counting exits in a burning room. Madison wiped under one eye carefully, trying not to ruin her makeup. This is insane, she said, but her voice had lost its power. You brought a lawyer to my wedding? Maya looked at her calmly. No, Miss Bennett. Your family brought forged trust documents to your wedding. I brought the originals. A quiet murmur moved through the guests. Ethan's jaw tightened. Charles Whitmore did not look surprised anymore. He looked focused, which was worse for my mother. because focused men like him did not get pulled easily into tears, family drama, or pretty explanations. My mother stepped between Maya and the table. You have no right to turn a private family issue into a public spectacle. Maya did not raise her voice. Mrs. Bennett, this stopped being private when a collateral release carrying my client's alleged signature was presented as part of a financial agreement with the Whitmore family. My mother opened her mouth, but Maya continued before she could reshape the story. I am not here to argue about feelings. I am here to make sure no one uses Claire Bennett's name, consent, or legal rights without authorization. For the first time that night, I felt the floor under me again. Not because the pain was gone. It was still there, deep and old. But Maya's voice gave the truth a frame. For years, my family had kept everything blurry, calling forgery a mistake, theft a misunderstanding, silence loyalty, and fear love. Maya made things clear. A signature was either real or it was not. Consent was either given or it was not. My name either belonged to me or it did not. Charles gestured toward the front table. Miss Lawson, I would like to understand exactly what my company was given. Maya nodded and opened her briefcase. She removed a folder sealed in a clear evidence sleeve, then placed it beside the leather folder Charles had been holding. 8 years ago, a consent form was submitted to release funds from the Margaret Ellis Family Trust into Bennett Legacy Group. Claire did not sign that form. The original copy, the transfer confirmation, the signature comparison, and my file notes from that year are here. Today, my office received a verification request from Whitmore Counsel regarding a new trust release connected to a collateral package. The signature on that new release resembles the old forgery, not Claire's verified current signature. Ethan turned toward Madison slowly. You told me your family assets were clean. Madison looked trapped between outrage and fear. They are. This is just Claire trying to punish us because Grandma left her special papers. My mother grabbed Madison's hand, but Madison pulled away, too panicked to understand that she was making things worse. She has always wanted to ruin things for me, Madison said. Grandma gave her attention. Then Claire acted like everything belonged to her. I looked at my sister in her white dress, standing under flowers my parents had paid for with money they did not have, in front of a man she had planned to marry into security and status. For the first time, I saw how frightened she was of losing the story she had lived inside. Madison did not think she was lying. Not exactly. She thought the world owed her protection from the consequences of truth. Maya opened another page. The trust terms are narrow. No major release, pledge, or collateral use can proceed without Claire's clear written consent. That clause exists because Margaret Ellis suspected pressure and misuse before her death. My mother made a sharp sound. My mother was old and paranoid. Maya turned one page without looking at her. Your mother was organized. She documented dates, account movements, and family pressure. Her notes were specific. My father finally stood. His chair scraped loudly enough to make several guests flinch. This does not need to continue here, he said. Charles, I apologize for the disruption. Let us step into a private room and settle this like adults. Charles looked at him with a cold politeness that made my father seem smaller. Richard, I was asked to connect a business agreement to assets I was told were properly authorized. Now I am hearing that the required signer was seated in a hallway beside the trash cans, and that her alleged consent may be false. We will not step into a private room so your family can control the witnesses. That sentence landed harder than anger would have. My mother's face tightened. Madison looked toward the hallway, as if she hated the chair for existing. Ethan followed her gaze. I saw him see it fully now, not as a seating mistake, but as evidence of intent. They had hidden me, because I was inconvenient. They had kept me near, because they still needed what belonged to me. The wedding coordinator, who had been standing frozen near the service door, whispered, I have the seating instructions. My mother turned so sharply the coordinator stepped back. Charles looked at the young woman. Please continue. Her face reddened, but she took a folded paper from her clipboard. Mrs. Bennett approved the final chart yesterday. Miss Claire Bennett was originally listed at Family Table 2, Then moved to the hallway seat this morning. She swallowed. There was also a note that said she should not be brought to the front unless Mrs. Bennet requested it. Ethan stared at his bride. You knew? Madison shook her head, but not quickly enough. Mom handled seating. My mother said. It was to avoid conflict. Maya looked at the chart, and then at me. Conflict or contact? No one answered her. Charles took the seating paper and placed it beside the trust release. The two documents had nothing to do with each other legally, but together they told the truth better than any speech. One showed they needed my name. The other showed they wanted my body out of sight. That was my family, in 2 pieces of paper. My mother tried to regain control by turning soft again. Claire, please, look at what you are doing to your sister. On her wedding day, I felt the old pull of that voice. It had trained me, for years. It told me that my pain was less urgent than Madison's embarrassment, that my truth was less important than the family image, that a good daughter swallowed the knife so no one else had to see blood. But then I thought of Margaret's letter, still open on the table, and the pull broke. I did not forge anything, I said. I did not move the money 8 years ago. I did not create the new release. I did not seat myself beside the trash. I am not doing this to Madison. I am refusing to carry it for her again. Madison's face twisted. You always act like a victim. Ethan stepped back from her. It was not dramatic, but she noticed. Her anger turned toward him instantly. Do not look at me like that. You do not know what she is like. Ethan's voice was low. I know what I have seen tonight. Madison's eyes filled again, but this time no one rushed to rescue her. Maya turned to Charles. My recommendation is simple. Stop all business action involving Bennett Legacy Group and any collateral tied to the Margaret Ellis Family Trust. Notify your counsel formally. Preserve every document already exchanged. If the Bennetts attempt to destroy emails, messages, drafts, camera footage, or financial records, that behavior may become relevant in civil litigation or a fraud complaint. Charles nodded once. That will be done. My father sat down again, as if his legs had weakened. My mother stared at him with fury, not because he had caused this alone, but because he was failing to save them from it. Then she looked at me, and for the first time in my life, she did not look disappointed. She looked afraid. That should have satisfied me. Part of me wished it did. But standing there, with strangers watching, and my sister's wedding collapsing around us, I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired of being the locked room where everyone hid what they did not want named. Tired of being told that truth was cruelty. Tired of loving people who only remembered I was family when they needed my silence. Charles closed his folder. Ethan, he said, there will be no ceremony until this is resolved. Madison gasped, as if he had struck her. My mother lunged toward Charles with a desperate smile. Please, do not punish 2 young people for a paperwork issue. Charles looked from her to Madison, then to the chair in the hallway. Mrs. Bennet, this is no longer a paperwork issue. Maya placed the original backup file beside Margaret's box. Claire, she said softly, you do not have to answer anything else tonight unless you choose to. I looked at the documents, then at my mother, then at Madison. For 8 years, they had decided what parts of me were useful and what parts should disappear. Tonight, for the first time, the choice was mine. I picked up the place card from my purse and set it on the table beside the forged release, Claire Bennet, written in silver ink. The name they had tried to hide, the name they had tried to use. Then I looked at Madison and said, You said I did not count, so tell them why my signature does. Madison looked at the place card on the table, as if it had become something alive. Claire Bennet, written in silver ink, the same name she had laughed at beside the trash cans. Now, lying next to the forged trust release that could destroy everything she had spent a year dressing in flowers and white silk. For once, she had no quick answer. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes moved to our mother, begging for rescue without wanting to appear weak enough to need it. My mother stepped forward immediately. Madison does not have to explain anything under pressure, she said. Her voice had found its old firmness again, but it sounded thinner now. This is emotional blackmail. Claire has always known how to twist a room against us. Maya placed one hand on the backup file and looked at her calmly. Mrs. Bennet, your daughter asked a fair question. If Claire does not count in this family, why does her legal consent appear on financial documents connected to your company? That question did what anger could not. It made the lie smaller than the room. My mother could not turn it into jealousy, personality, or family tension. It was a document. It had a date. It had a signature. It had a purpose. Charles Whitmore stood beside the table waiting. Ethan stood a few steps away from Madison, not beside her anymore. My father sat with his hands folded, staring at the polished floor as though the answer might be written there if he avoided enough faces. Madison finally spoke. I do not know anything about tonight's paperwork. Her voice trembled, but she was careful now. Dad handles business. Mom handles family things. I was getting married. I was not sitting around reading trust forms. For a moment, she almost sounded believable. Then Charles reached into his leather folder and removed a printed email. This message came from your account 3 weeks ago, he said. It says the trust release would be finished before the wedding, and that Claire would not be an obstacle. Madison stared at the page. I did not mean it like that. Ethan's face hardened. What did you mean? She looked at him with wounded disbelief, as if his asking was the betrayal. I meant Mom was handling it. Everyone knew Claire would be difficult if she found out too early. The silence after that was worse than the first. Too early. Not if. Too early. She had said the quiet part plainly, the way spoiled people often did when they forgot the world was allowed to judge them. Maya turned another page in her file. There is also a scanned copy of the new release sent from Bennett Legacy Group to Whitmore Council. The signature was dated 2 days ago. She looked at me. Claire was not contacted. Claire did not approve this. Claire did not even know the release existed, my mother said. Because we knew she would refuse just to punish us. I felt something inside me settle when she said that. Not because it hurt less, but because she had finally admitted the truth. Beneath her excuses, they had not asked, because they knew my answer. So you signed for me, I said. My mother's lips pressed together. Madison snapped before she could stop herself. You act like your signature is holy. Ethan took another step back. Madison saw it and turned on him. Do you know what she did to this family? She let us struggle for years because Grandma filled her head with ideas about ownership and control. I looked at Madison, and for the first time that night, I felt no urge to defend myself. Her words were not aimed at truth. They were aimed at survival. Charles looked at my father. Richard, is the signature authentic? My father's face sagged. My mother said his name sharply, but Charles did not look away. You are asking my family to accept collateral connected to this trust. I am asking a direct question. My father swallowed. I did not see Claire sign it. My mother turned on him. That is not what he asked. Richard looked up slowly, and the years between the first forgery and this night seemed to sit on his shoulders. No, he said. I cannot say it is authentic. The room changed. Not loudly. No one gasped. But every guest understood that something had crossed a line. My mother could cry. Madison could blame me. My father could call it pressure or confusion. But the groom's family had just heard him refuse to confirm the signature that supported the deal. Madison's voice rose. Dad, stop. He looked at her with a sadness I had wanted from him for years, and hated receiving only now. Madison, enough. She shook her head. No, you do not get to fall apart now. Her eyes flashed toward our mother. You said it would work. You said Charles only needed the release in the folder, and no one would ask questions until after the wedding. The words left her too fast to catch. My mother grabbed her arm, but Madison jerked away. Do not touch me. You told me Claire would sit where no one could find her. Ethan stared at her. You knew she was seated outside. Madison's face crumpled with anger. It was one chair. It was not supposed to matter. His voice was quiet. It mattered enough that you hid her. She looked around then, truly seeing the room for the first time. The bridesmaids staring, the groomsmen silent, the guests pretending not to hold their breath. Her perfect wedding had become a courtroom without a judge, and every sentence she spoke added another piece of evidence. My mother tried to pull everything back. Madison is upset. She is saying things out of fear. Maya looked at her. Fear of what, Mrs. Bennet? Fear that Claire would expose a false signature? Or fear that your daughter would admit you planned to keep her away from Mr. Whitmore until the agreement was complete? My mother's face tightened. She had no answer clean enough for public use. I turned to Ethan. I did not come here to destroy your wedding. My voice stayed even, though my hands were cold. I came because Madison is my sister, and some part of me still thought showing up meant something. I brought my grandmother's box because I was going to decide tonight whether to warn your family quietly. Then I saw my seat. I looked toward the hallway, and I realized they were not just ashamed of me. They were afraid of what I knew. Ethan looked at the chair, then at Madison. Were you going to tell me about any of this after we were married? Madison's answer came too late. Of course, Charles said. When? She looked at him, trapped. When it was not going to ruin everything. Ethan's jaw tightened. So, after the agreement, after the ceremony, after my family was already tied to yours. Madison started crying then, real tears this time, but not the kind that cleaned anything. I was trying to save us. Mom said if the Whitmore deal went through, Bennet legacy would recover, and then no one would have to know what happened before. There it was. The bridge between the old lie and the new one. 8 years ago, they had moved trust money into Bennet Legacy Group and told themselves it would come back before anyone noticed. Tonight, they had tried to use the remaining trust rights as collateral and told themselves it would all be fine once the Whitmore money arrived. The same lie, dressed better. The same theft, spoken with richer guests nearby. Charles closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with a cold finality. This is attempted financial fraud. My mother flinched. Madison sobbed harder. My father bowed his head. Charles continued. My counsel will handle the business side. The wedding is my son's decision. But the Whitmore family will not enter any financial agreement with Bennet Legacy Group. Not tonight. Not later. My mother whispered. Charles, please. He looked at her. You seated the lawful signer beside the trash while presenting her name as consent. There is nothing left to discuss. Madison turned to me then, and the hatred in her eyes was almost a relief because it was honest. Are you happy now? She asked. I looked at her in the dress my parents had built a fantasy around, surrounded by flowers paid for with borrowed confidence, and another stolen version of my name. No, I said. I am free. For the first time, she had no answer. Maya quietly gathered the documents into 2 neat piles, the old forgery and the new release. Margaret's letter remained open beside them. My grandmother's handwriting looked small under the ballroom lights, but it had survived every lie in that room. Your name is yours. No one who loves you will ask to borrow it in secret. I touched the edge of the page, and something in me that had been braced for 8 years finally loosened. Then Ethan removed his wedding ring from the small velvet tray beside the officiant's book. Madison saw him do it and went still. The room seemed to breathe in at once. He did not throw it. He did not shout. He simply placed it on the table beside the forged signature and said, I need the truth before I can promise anything. Madison looked at the ring, then at me, and for the first time in our lives, she understood what it felt like to lose the center of the room. When Ethan placed the wedding ring on the table, the sound was small, but Madison reacted as if the whole ballroom had shattered. She stared at the ring, then at him, her mouth opening in disbelief. You cannot be serious, she said. Ethan, this is our wedding. Her voice cracked on the last word, not with love, but with panic. The guests were watching now without pretending not to. The officiant had stepped back from the arch. The bridesmaids stood frozen with their bouquets held too tightly. My mother looked from Ethan to Charles, then to me, searching for the one weak place in the room where she could push and make everything move back into place. Ethan did not pick up the ring. Madison, I asked you for the truth. She wiped her cheek and gave him the look that had worked on my parents for years, wounded, shining, almost childlike. I was scared. Mom said it was just paperwork. Dad said the company needed time. I did not want money problems to ruin what we have. Ethan's face did not soften. You let my family walk into a business agreement while hiding the one person whose consent mattered. Madison glanced at me with open resentment. Because she would have said no. Charles answered before I could. That is exactly why consent exists. My mother stepped forward as if she could still turn a legal disaster into a family argument. Claire can fix this. The room shifted toward her. I felt Maya's hand lightly touch my arm, not to stop me, only to remind me that I did not have to answer. My mother came closer, lowering her voice but not enough to keep the front tables from hearing. Claire, sign the proper release now. We will withdraw the other one, call it a clerical error, and no one has to be hurt more than they already have. I looked at her, almost amazed. The forged document was on the table. Madison's confession was still warm in the air. Ethan's ring lay beside the proof. And my mother's first instinct was not apology. It was negotiation. No, I said. My mother's eyes sharpened. Do not be childish. Maya moved slightly, but I lifted one hand to let her know I wanted to speak. You seated me beside the trash cans, then asked me to save you from the consequences of using my name. That is not family. That is theft with flowers around it. A few guests murmured. Madison's face twisted. You are enjoying this. I turned to her. I am standing where you tried to keep me from standing. That is not the same thing. My father pushed himself up from the chair. He looked older now, and for one moment I saw the man he could have been if he had chosen honesty the first time. Claire, he said, his voice rough. Your mother is wrong to ask this here. But if the company collapses, people will lose jobs. There are employees who did nothing to you. That almost worked. Not because it was fair, but because guilt had always been the hand they used on the back of my neck. I looked at him and remembered being 24, holding the first forged form while he stared at the floor. Then you should not have built those jobs on a signature you did not have, I said. You had 8 years to repair this. You used 8 years to practice. The words hit him hard. He sat back down without answering. Charles looked at my father with cold disappointment. Richard, did your company submit the new release, knowing Claire had not signed it? My father swallowed. My mother cut in before he could answer. Charles, please. You are making this sound worse than it is. Charles turned to her. Mrs. Bennet, I have spent 40 years reading bad deals. The people who say it is not as bad as it looks are usually the reason it looks bad. Ethan looked at his father, then at Madison. I need to know who sent the release. Madison pressed her lips together. My mother looked at her once, a warning hidden inside a glance. But Madison was too frightened to obey quietly now. Mom sent it through Dad's office, she said. I only forwarded the schedule and told your assistant that Claire would not be available until the reception. Ethan's expression darkened. You told my assistant Claire would not be available? Madison's voice rose. Because she was not supposed to be. She was supposed to sit outside until Mom brought her in after the signing, just for photos if we needed them. The room went so quiet I could hear the air conditioning. For a second, I did not feel angry. I felt emptied out. There it was, plain and ugly. I was not meant to be a sister, a guest, or even a witness. I was meant to be kept like a tool in a drawer, hidden until useful, blamed if discovered, discarded when done. Maya picked up the seating instruction sheet and placed it beside the new release. That statement matters, she said. It shows intent to prevent Claire from learning about the document before the financial discussion was complete. My mother glared at her. Stop turning my daughter against her family. Maya's voice stayed calm. I did not seat Claire outside. I did not forge her name. I did not tell the Whitmores she had consented. Your choices are doing that work without my help. Madison suddenly turned toward the guests. Why is everyone looking at me like I am some monster? Her voice broke into a sob. I wanted one beautiful day. Is that so wrong? No one answered. maybe because the answer was too obvious. Wanting beauty was not wrong. Building it out of another woman's stolen name was. My mother reached for Madison again, and this time Madison let her. They stood together in a small white and pearl-colored circle of self-pity, while the documents lay open on the table like bones. Ethan looked at Madison for a long time. "I loved you," he said quietly. Madison flinched. "Do not say it like that." He continued anyway. "I loved the person I thought you were. But tonight I watched you humiliate your sister, lie about where she was, hide her from my family, and defend a forged document because it helped you." Madison shook her head violently. "No, Claire did this. She came here with that box. She planned this." I almost answered, but Ethan did it for me. "You gave her a chair by the trash. You gave her the reason to open it." My mother's face hardened. That was when the mask finally slipped. "Fine," she said, looking directly at me. "You want truth. Here is the truth. Margaret favored you, and she punished the rest of us by tying family assets to your permission. She knew you would use it one day to control us." Her voice shook with years of resentment. I did what I had to do to protect Madison's future. I stared at her, and the last thin thread of daughterly hope inside me broke cleanly. "No," I said. "You protected Madison from becoming responsible. That is not the same thing." Charles closed his leather folder. "Ethan, we are leaving the business side to counsel. As for the ceremony, that decision is yours." Everyone turned to Ethan. Madison reached for his hand, but he stepped back before her fingers touched him. "I cannot marry into a lie," he said. Madison made a small wounded sound. "You are choosing her over me." Ethan looked at the documents, then at the hallway, then finally at me. "No, I am choosing not to marry someone who thinks this is love." My mother rushed toward him, desperate now. "Ethan, please. Madison made mistakes, but she adores you." Charles stepped between them, not aggressively, just enough to end the performance. "The ceremony is paused. The guests will be informed that there is a private family matter." My mother almost laughed in disbelief. "Private? After what you all just did?" Charles looked at her calmly. "After what you all brought into this room." Hotel staff began moving quietly near the back, unsure whether to clear plates or guide guests out. The string quartet packed their instruments with careful silence. Madison stood under the floral arch, her veil crooked, her mascara beginning to run. The room that had been designed to prove she mattered most had become the room where everyone saw what that privilege had cost. My mother turned back to me one last time. "You will regret this," she said. "One day, you will realize that being right is a lonely place to live." I picked up Margaret's letter and placed it back in the wooden box. Then I looked at the chair in the hallway, the place card on the table, and the forged signature beside it. "Maybe," I said, "but it is still better than being loved only when I am useful." Maya closed the backup file. Charles gathered his papers. Ethan removed the boutonniere from his jacket and set it beside the ring. Madison watched him do it, and this time she did not scream. She only stared, pale and silent, as the beautiful day she had built on my silence finally began to fall apart in front of everyone. The guests did not leave all at once. That would have been kinder. Instead, the room emptied in slow, painful pieces. First, the older couples near the back stood quietly and gathered their coats. Then Madison's friends began whispering into their phones, no longer pretending they were checking messages. One of Ethan's groomsmen spoke to the hotel manager near the entrance, and a few minutes later, staff members began guiding people toward the lobby with professional smiles that could not hide the shock in their eyes. The wedding that had been planned as a display of beauty and status became a procession of embarrassed silence. Madison stood under the floral arch, as if refusing to move would force the day to continue. Her veil hung crooked now, one side lower than the other. The perfect bride image was falling apart in small details: a loose pin, streaked makeup, trembling hands, a dress too bright for the ugliness around it. She kept looking at Ethan, waiting for him to come back to her, waiting for him to remember the version of her he had loved. But Ethan did not move toward her. He stood beside Charles, pale and quiet, with the look of a man grieving someone who was still alive. My mother tried to follow the guests, smiling weakly, touching arms, saying there had been a misunderstanding. No one argued with her. They did something worse. They nodded politely and kept walking. Every person who passed her took a piece of her performance with them. Evelyn Bennett had spent her life controlling rooms through tone, posture, and guilt. That night, she learned what it felt like when a room no longer wanted to be controlled. Charles spoke with his legal counsel by phone near the front table. He did not shout, did not threaten for effect, and did not need to. His calm was heavier than anger. When he ended the call, he looked at my father and said the Whitmore family would immediately suspend all business discussions with Bennett Legacy Group. All documents exchanged would be preserved. Their counsel would request full records, including emails, drafts, trust communications, internal approvals, and any messages related to my alleged consent. If any documents disappeared, he said, that fact would become part of the case. Richard nodded like a man who had aged 10 years in 1 hour. I understand, he said. My mother turned on him. Do not just stand there and accept this. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for once he did not fold the second her voice sharpened. Evelyn, it is over. The words were quiet, but they struck her harder than if he had shouted. Her face changed with disbelief. For years he had been her silent wall. Tonight, even the wall had cracks. Madison heard him and snapped. No, it is not over. Ethan just needs time. Dad, tell them we can fix it. Richard's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the forged release on the table, then at the old file Maya had brought, then at me. Shame moved across his face, but shame was not the same as courage, and it came years too late. Madison, he said, you need to stop talking. She stared at him as if he had betrayed her, because in her world, love had always meant protection from consequences. Ethan finally approached her, stopping several feet away. Madison reached for his hand. He did not take it. Please, she said. And for the first time that night, her voice sounded small. You know me. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. I thought I did. Madison began to cry harder. I was scared. My family was under pressure. Mom said once the deal went through, everything would be paid back. It was not supposed to hurt anyone. Ethan's face tightened. It hurt Claire 8 years ago. It hurt her again tonight. And you still called that a seating issue? Madison looked at me then with a hatred that had lost its polish. She always makes people feel sorry for her. I did not answer, because the room no longer needed me to prove anything. That was the strange relief of truth finally being visible. I did not have to explain the chair. The chair was there. I did not have to explain the signature. The documents were there. I did not have to explain Madison's cruelty. Her own words had done it better than mine ever could. Ethan removed the boutonniere from his jacket earlier, but now he took off the slim gold band he had already placed on his finger during a private photo session before the ceremony. He held it in his palm for a second, then set it beside the ring tray. I cannot marry you tonight, he said. Madison froze. My mother gasped as if he had insulted the family rather than refused to enter a lie. Madison whispered, Tonight? Ethan's eyes were wet, but his voice stayed firm. I do not know if I can marry you at all. That was the moment Madison truly broke. Not when the documents appeared, not when Charles said fraud, not when guests began to leave. She broke when she understood that the wedding was not merely paused for appearances. The life she had imagined, the status she had counted, the family she expected to marry into, were slipping away in front of witnesses she had invited to admire her. She turned to our mother with a wild, wounded look. You said this would work. My mother's face went blank. Those 5 words did what no legal folder had done. They pointed to the center of the scheme. Charles heard them. Maya heard them. Ethan heard them. My father lowered his head again. But this time there was no hiding in silence. Madison realized too late what she had said. She pressed her hands to her mouth, but it was already done. Maya wrote something in her notebook. She did not look triumphant. She looked precise. "Claire," she said softly, "that statement matters." My mother rounded on her. "Stop recording my daughter's pain like it is evidence." Maya looked up. "Mrs. Bennet, your daughter is describing intent." My mother shook with anger, but she had no clean answer left. The hotel manager approached Charles, and then my father, asking whether the reception should be formally canceled. Richard looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at Madison. Madison looked at Ethan. No one wanted to be the first to say the word. Finally, Ethan did. "Cancel it." His voice was quiet, but everyone close enough heard. The manager nodded and stepped away to instruct the staff. Within minutes, the candles were being snuffed, the cake table was being covered, and the dinner that had not yet been served was being rolled back toward the kitchen. Madison watched the staff dismantle her perfect evening, and every small movement seemed to wound her. The flowers were no longer romance, they were invoices. The cake was no longer a symbol. It was proof of a celebration that had died before dinner. The band packed their equipment. The photographer lowered his camera and stood awkwardly near the wall. A wedding designed to make Madison look chosen ended with her standing in the middle of a room that no longer chose her. My mother came toward me one last time. Her eyes were red, but there was no apology in them. "Are you proud?" she asked. "You have destroyed your sister's wedding, your father's company, and this family's name." I looked at her and felt the old guilt try to rise. It came weakly now, like a voice from another room. "No," I said. "You did that when you used my name and called it family." Her lips tightened. "Margaret poisoned you against us." I held the wooden box closer. "No, she warned me about you." For a second, I thought my mother might slap me. Her hand moved, then stopped when she noticed Maya watching. That was Evelyn Bennet in one small gesture. Even her anger checked the room first. Richard came to me after that. He did not ask for forgiveness. Maybe he knew better. He looked at the place card on the table, and then at the hallway where my chair still sat near the trash cans. "I should have stopped it the first time," he said. I waited for more, for the full truth, for the words a daughter deserved after 8 years. They did not come. He only looked smaller, and I realized that some apologies are too thin to shelter anyone. "Yes," I said. "You should have." That was all I gave him. Charles approached me with a grave nod. "Miss Bennet, my family owes you an apology for nearly becoming part of this." I shook my head. "You stopped when you saw the truth. That is more than my family did." He accepted that quietly. Ethan looked at me from beside his father, guilt in his face. "I am sorry about the chair," he said. "I should have noticed." I looked toward Madison, who was sobbing into my mother's shoulder while still glaring at me through tears. "It was not your chair to notice," I said. "It was theirs to be ashamed of." By the time Maya and I gathered Margaret's box, the ballroom had lost its glow. The lights were still on, the flowers were still white, the gold sign still read Bennett and Whitmore, but the names no longer looked joined. They looked like evidence from a story people would repeat in careful voices for years. Madison sat in a chair beneath the arch. No longer a bride, just a woman surrounded by the wreckage of what she thought she deserved. My mother stood beside her, furious that love had failed to erase fraud. My father remained at the table with his head in his hands. I picked up my silver place card before leaving. Claire Bennet. They had placed that name beside the trash, then tried to place it on a lie. Now it was back in my hand. For the first time that night, it felt like mine again. I left the Briarwood Hotel, with Margaret's box in my arms, and Maya walking beside me. The night air felt colder than before, but this time, it did not make me shake. Behind us, the ballroom lights still glowed through the glass doors, soft and golden, pretending the night had been beautiful. But beauty had always been easy to arrange. Truth was harder. Truth had no flowers, no music, no perfect seating chart. Truth stood in the middle of a room and waited for people to stop lying. Maya did not speak until we reached my car. She knew me well enough not to fill silence with comfort I had not asked for. I placed the wooden box on the passenger seat and looked back at the hotel. Somewhere inside, Madison was probably still crying. My mother was probably still blaming me, and my father was probably sitting in silence, discovering too late that silence could become evidence too. For years, I had imagined what it might feel like if they were finally exposed. I thought it would feel powerful. It did not. It felt quiet. It felt like putting down something heavy, after carrying it so long that my body had forgotten it was not part of me. Maya leaned against the driver's side door and said gently, "Tomorrow, they will start calling." I nodded. "I know." She looked at me carefully. "You do not have to answer." That was such a simple sentence, but it landed deeper than she knew. My whole life had been built around answering. Answer your mother when she calls. Answer Madison when she demands. Answer guilt with obedience. Answer cruelty with silence. That night, for the first time, I let myself imagine a phone ringing without my hand reaching for it. The call started before sunrise. First my father, then my mother, then unknown numbers I recognized as relatives who had not spoken to me in years, but suddenly cared about family unity. My mother left one message after another. At first she was furious, then wounded, then cold. She said I had humiliated Madison. She said I had ruined my father. She said Margaret would be ashamed of me. That last one almost made me answer, but I looked at the wooden box on my kitchen table and let the call go to voicemail. By noon, Maya had already sent formal notices. Charles Whitmore's legal team suspended all discussions with Bennett Legacy Group and requested preservation of every related document. The financial firm that processed the old trust transfer opened an internal review. Maya filed a detailed report on my behalf, not as revenge, but as protection. The forged signatures, the old release, the new collateral consent, the seating instructions, Madison's statements, and Margaret's notes were all organized into a record. No one could soften into family misunderstanding anymore. The consequences did not arrive like thunder. They came like locks clicking shut. Bennett Legacy Group lost the Whitmore deal by the end of the week. 2 lenders pulled back after learning there was a dispute over collateral. A board member resigned. My father's company, which had survived for years by pushing debt forward and calling it strategy, finally had to face the hole it had been hiding. Richard called me once and left a message that sounded older than him. He said he was sorry. He said he should have protected me. He said he understood if I never spoke to him again. For the first time, he had said the right words. For the first time, I did not need them. Madison's wedding photos never became wedding photos. They became evidence of a day that stopped before vows. Ethan ended the engagement 2 days later. He did it privately, according to Maya. But Madison made it public by trying to post a long statement about betrayal and jealousy. That statement disappeared within an hour. Maybe someone advised her to stop talking. Maybe she finally learned that not every room would rush to believe her tears. Either way, the silence that followed was not the kind my family had forced on me. It was the kind that comes when excuses run out. My mother tried hardest to rewrite the story. She told relatives I had planned everything because I hated Madison. She said Maya had manipulated me. She said Charles Whitmore had overreacted. But stories built on lies need the listener to want the lie. This time, too many people had seen the chair. Too many people had heard Madison say Mom said it would work. Too many people had watched my mother ask me to sign the proper release after the forged one had been exposed. Evelyn Bennett had spent decades teaching me that image mattered more than truth. Now her own image had become a room she could no longer control. 3 weeks after the wedding, I went back to Margaret's house. It had been sold years earlier, but the new owners had kept the green shutters. I parked across the street and sat there with the blue fountain pen in my hand. I did not cry at first. I just looked at the porch where Margaret used to stand with a cardigan around her shoulders, waving as if my arrival had improved the day. I thought about how much of my life I had spent trying to earn that feeling from people who had no intention of giving it. I opened her final letter again when I got home. Your name is yours. No one who loves you will ask to borrow it in secret. I had read that sentence many times since the wedding, but that day it meant something different. It was not only about signatures, it was about identity. My family had borrowed my name for documents, but they had also borrowed my patience, my guilt, my silence, my need to be loved. They had spent those things freely and called it family. I stopped letting them spend me. The legal process continued, slow and careful. Maya warned me that justice in paperwork moved differently than justice in stories. There would be reviews, statements, negotiations, maybe charges, maybe settlements, and nothing would feel as clean as people wanted it to feel. I understood. I did not need a dramatic ending, where everyone was dragged away in handcuffs before dessert. The real punishment had already begun. Madison lost the life she tried to steal her way into. Evelyn lost the perfect family image she had worshipped. Richard lost the comfort of pretending silence was harmless. And I lost the belief that their approval was something worth suffering for. That was the only loss that felt like freedom. 1 month after the wedding, a cream envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was my place card, Claire Bennett, written in silver ink. For a second, I thought my mother had sent it to hurt me, until I turned it over and saw a short note from the wedding coordinator. She wrote that she was sorry for following the seating instruction, and that she had told the truth because no one deserved to be hidden like that. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time with the card in my hand. Then I placed it inside Margaret's box, not because it was painful, but because it was proof. Proof that I had been there. Proof that they had tried to erase me. Proof that I stood up and left before they could use me again. I never got an apology from Madison. Not a real one. She sent one message weeks later that said she hoped I was happy. I deleted it. My mother sent longer messages, polished and poisonous, full of words like forgiveness, loyalty, and blood. I saved them for Maya, and did not answer. My father sent one final note saying he was cooperating with counsel. That was the closest he had ever come to choosing truth, without being forced by a louder person in the room. On a quiet Sunday morning, I made lemon tea the way Margaret had taught me. I opened the window, placed the wooden box on the table, and used the blue fountain pen to sign my own name on a clean piece of paper. Not on a trust release, not on a family demand, not on anything someone had slid across a table while calling pressure love. I signed it just to see the shape of it, steady and mine. For most of my life, my family made me believe that being left out meant I was worth less. That night at Madison's wedding taught me something different. Sometimes they put you outside the room because they know the room cannot survive your truth. Sometimes they call you difficult because you are the only one refusing to cooperate with a lie. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not scream, not beg, not fight for the seat they denied you. Sometimes you simply take your name back. Walk out with the truth in your hands, and let the people who built their lives on your silence hear the music stop behind them.